And at some point in the night, I run into a woman who I've been on a date with before, but not a second date with, right? And a nice woman, I don't have anything bad to say about her, but seeing her out, talk to her, dance with her for a little bit. She ends up inviting me to kind of hang out with her a little bit later in the night, but I don't end up doing that because I have some other things going on, let's say. And anyways, on that first date, right, the thing that made me not want to go on a second date with her was around her expectations for what the kind of relationship or dating experience would be like, right? So on the date, we're out at a little um, kind of El Salvadoran place eating some food. And on the date, she says something like, well, you're a accomplished professional guy, and so I would think that you this and that and that. And in my mind, sure, I'm a professional and I feel like I've accomplished some things, but those things I feel like are not necessarily reflective of my personality, right? I felt like essentially what she was getting at was you have money, and so these are the things I expect from a guy who has money that I'm dating. And my view was more like, sure, I have money, but we're not at the level where I would really be even considering sharing my money with you in that sort of way, right? And this wasn't even about kind of paying for the date, paying for the food on the date. I ended up paying that time, um, but it made me think, okay, her expectations of what a guy should be doing in a relationship and a new relationship are different than my expectations. And particularly as she was saying, you as a guy, this and that, what I didn't hear was, and me as a woman, this and that, right? So, and again, this may just be my interpretation. I want to make sure to give her the benefit of the doubt. Um, but my interpretation was, hey, I'm expecting these things from someone I'm dating. And what I did not hear was, and these are the things that I'm offering or bringing to the table in order to earn, these things from you as the man, right? If you're, in my view, if you're talking about what a man should be doing in a relationship, then it would also be wise to talk about what the woman should be doing in the relationship so that we're both clear on the roles and expectations moving forward, right? And essentially, what I felt was that it was a way of asking for more without also recognizing the part that you play in bringing that balance to a relationship. And so I did not follow up about a second date, but she did end up reaching out for a second date. And so I essentially, said that I would be interested in the date if we split the bill, right? If she paid for this part and I pay for that part. It was like, she mentioned dinner and a movie. And I was like, okay, well, how about, or a movie and food or something. And I essentially suggested, okay, what if I pay for this part and you pay for that part? And that was two things, right? It was one, an attempt to say, I'm expecting this input or this from you in the relationship, and here's the part that I'm going to be doing. But it was also a little bit of a pushback of just, hey, you're a guy, you have money, therefore I expect, dates and dates where you as the guy pays. And I bring this up in this video because I think that this is very, very common. And although I've talked about it from a guy's perspective and the thing that a woman said to me, I feel like this is common for men and for women, where, and just people in general, we all have expectations around what we feel like a budding romance should look like and what we want from a budding romance, right? What we want and what we think it should look like. That's well and good. However, the main point here is that if you're saying what you want without saying what you're offering or what you're bringing to the table, then it sounds a bit like a kind of the vibe it gives off can be a bit of a taker vibe, a bit of I want more, I want more, I want more, without also saying, and here's what I'm willing to offer to get more, right? Now, for me, that is and was a bit of a deal breaker, right? So, again, nice woman otherwise, but a relationship, in my view, especially a good, well working relationship, is always two sided, right? There's always a give and take, there's always some sort of compromise. And to ask for more is fine when you feel like you're not getting what you want, right? It's a good thing to communicate and speak up and ask for the things that you want. However, you should also realize that if the other person really didn't feel like they were doing enough, then they would change that. And so, as you're asking for more, recognize or expect that the other person is doing what they feel is best. And so, just saying, I want more when the other person already feels like they're doing what's appropriate and what's good and what's best doesn't quite jive, right? There has to be a little bit more of an understanding, maybe a little bit more of a softer tone, a little bit more of I would say a little bit of compassion, right? And it's not to again, I want to be very clear, right? This isn't a judgment. This isn't a put down. This isn't a talking talking about somebody behind their back. It's more of this is how I viewed it, and I'm sharing these things because I feel like the way I viewed it is quite common, right? I feel like people always saying, I want this, I want that, without also saying what they're willing to offer to get it is not sustainable in the long term, right? It's not presenting a situation as a win win, it's presenting it as a I want more, and if I don't get it, I'm going to be upset, right? I think there is definitely a time and place for this is this is what I want, this is what I expect, and if I'm not going to get that, then I'm gone, right? It's sort of take it or leave it. However, I feel like to make a positive long-term relationship work, there is also compromise that comes into it. It can't just be this is what I want, and if you don't give it to me, I'm going to keep going out and searching to find someone that gives me all the things that I want. I feel like a great relationship starts from a base of hey, all of my need to haves are met, but for these like to haves and want to haves, I'm willing to make room to compromise. And again, I'm bringing this up for men and for women, right? I feel like continuing on the women's side for a little bit, that things I often hear from women are along the lines of, I feel like guys should be doing these things in a budding relationship. What I don't hear as much of is, from these women at least, is, and as a woman, it's my responsibility or my role to do these things, right? So if you are clarifying roles, make sure that all the roles are clarified. And so that way it's not just, I want more. It's, let's come to a common understanding of what each of us is supposed to be doing, right? How we each are contributing, how we each are helping to move things forward. Because if you're not focused on yourself, when you're pointing the finger at others, then it can come off as hypocritical or a little bit insensitive, right? And now to get on the guy side, I feel like oftentimes what I hear from guys is something along the lines of she wasn't showing the sort of interest, she wasn't showing enough interest, right? In many different ways. She wasn't, I was sending her these long texts and she was just giving me a one word reply, or I'm tired of always being the one to have to ask her on a date, or you know, uh, I went for the kiss and she pulled back, and so she doesn't like me, and it's over, right? Essentially, what I hear from the guys is, I'm showing interest, I'm doing enough, and she isn't meeting me based on what I've shown, and therefore I should move on, or therefore it's not going to work out. And again, while I think there is some merit to wanting, I don't think it's wrong at all to want more from someone else. I think the way it's thought about in your own head and the way it's presented as others when you communicate these thoughts, these feelings, these expectations really does matter, really does make a huge difference. So, overall, the way you talk about how you expect a date and relationship to work will matter a lot. And when you are talking about things that you want, make sure you are also highlighting what you will be doing to, in some way, kind of earn these things back, right? So for the texting example that I mentioned about the guys, right? I've heard a lot of guys say, "Hey, we matched on this app, started sending her messages, and I keep getting short replies back. Why would she match with me if she isn't then going to follow up and show the interest in her messages?" What I don't hear from the guys that say this oftentimes is a reflection on the sort of messages that they are sending, right? So, what I'm going to do is provide a little counterexample and say, maybe you are just sending boring messages that people don't want to reply to in the same length and way that you want, right? You send a boring message, I don't feel like sending, you send a, paragraph long message about this and that, and I'm not really feeling the content or the vibe, I don't necessarily want to have to send a paragraph back. And I feel like that's very, very reasonable. So while you are expecting someone to meet you halfway and feel like, hey, I'm investing in this, trying to make it work by sending a long message that, shares more detail, gives you more to respond to, I think what is missing from that is a view into the other person's experience, right? A view into how that message may be received, right? You know what you're expecting when you send it, but do you know how that message is being received? And I know many guys will say, well, no, I don't know how my messages are being received, but it'll be weird if I just ask, well, how's this message coming off? And fair point, it could be kind of weird. You just meet someone and then you send something, and how did that sound? It can sound like you're second guessing yourself, and that can actually be very counterproductive, right? It can seem very unconfident, very low self esteem, very just awkward, right? But if you were to send those messages and then, get some feedback from someone else who didn't match with you on the date, right, but could still share their opinion, share their ideas, then you would be getting more insight into how those messages could be received. And by having more insight into how those messages could be received, you could alter your messages in the future and get better results, right? To go back to the other example that I brought up before, Perfectly fine for a woman to have the expectation that, hey, as a guy, I expect you to pay for this and that, and I expect you to lead in this way. Something I hear a lot. Cool. However, do you know how that is received by men when you say that? If you don't, then you saying what you want could, in some ways, be a turnoff to guys, as it was with this woman and me. So, the key here is that you have to be willing to seek out feedback. And when you are seeking out feedback, really, and particularly in these cases where things haven't worked out, you have to seek out feedback that is not in 100% agreement with what you already believe. If what you already believe is, if you seek out feedback and it's just validation for what you already think, if you seek out feedback and in the guy's example, you find, your guy friend that says, "Oh yeah, absolutely, man, you're doing everything right. You're sending these messages and these one word responses aren't working." Then you will have no impetus to change and you will continue getting the same sorts of results that you will before, right? And of course, there are always different women, different circumstances, people who you have different chemistry with. And so you may continue with the same approach and have way better results with the very next woman that you match with or that you talk to, right? The same woman could have, say the same things about her expectations of men and have way better results, quote unquote, better results, whatever that means, with the next guy that she meets and goes on a date with. And I hope she does. Again, nice person. However, what I think will help you grow more and help you get a more broader understanding is to seek out opinions that are a little bit different and even sometimes contrary to what you already think, right? By having this additional perspective that comes from seeking out feedback and seeking out feedback that doesn't just validate what you already think, you are broadening your perspective. And with a broader perspective, you may be able to see someone's viewpoint where before you could not see it, right? You can come to a common understanding or a common viewpoint or a common way to move forward, a common set of expectations, where before you were just more focused on, hey, this is what I want and it's my way or the highway, right? And it doesn't even mean compromise and give up on the things that you want, but it means understanding that if you are able to meet someone where they're at and move forward from where they are to where you want to go, then that can be better for you in the long term. It gives you more options because it's allowing you to help other people meet you where you're at because you have done the work to meet them where they're at. And that is a very, very important point right there. And even really, like, you can say it's even the same point that I even started the video with, depending on your perspective, is that it starts with you, right? It starts with you. In my example, when I look back at this date with the woman, what I think is not she presented this, expectation and it was really out there, and so I had to let her go. What I think about more so is that, hmm, I wish I had communicated a viewpoint where I wish I communicated in a way that let her, that enabled her to understand the way I saw things. Because at the end of the day, I'm not quite sure that she understood my hesitations and understood the way I really saw things. Right? And so at the end of the day, it's not her fault for wanting this and that from a budding relationship. I view it as it's my fault for not communicating clearly what my perspective was based on the information that she shared with me. because I'm more than happy to. I share my viewpoint. She shares her viewpoint. She understands my perspective. I understand her perspective, and we have differing opinions. Because we have differing opinions, we feel like, hey, this is going to work out long term, and we go our separate ways. Because when you have that common understanding, right, you can still have a good relationship, but it's probably going to be a friendship and not a romantic relationship, right? You've done the work to understand each other. You see the other person's viewpoint, and you can kind of leave with the respect of, okay, I don't see it quite my way. I don't see it quite that way myself, but I could understand how someone in that position would see it that way, and so I accept them, and it's all good. When you don't have that understanding, it's harder to get to that place of the mutual respect, the mutual understanding, the mutual well wishes, and it can feel a little bit more of, particularly with when feelings are involved, it can feel a little bit more of something that comes off or leaves a bitter taste in someone's mouth, right? Something a little bit sour. And I think we all want to avoid those sour situations. So, how to do this, right? The key is to communicate more and communicate in a way that is not so confrontational, but also still gets your point across, right? Again, the goal here is to be understood and to understand the other person, right? The goal is not to agree, right? You may be going on a date thinking the goal is to get more dates. I feel like as you're meeting someone and getting to know them, right, the first thing is to understand what type of person they are. As you understand what type of person they are and they understand what type of person you are, it's then natural that if you understand them and the things that you're understanding and seeing and being exposed to and getting a chance to witness are things you like, the attraction will be very, very natural. It will be seamless. If you're having trouble understanding them or seeing enough of their behavioral cues or enough of their opinions to really be able to form a good picture, then the attraction will not be so seamless, will not just be automatic, right? And so understanding is a big part, and understanding does take time. Now, there's different levels to this, right? You don't have to understand someone very completely before you move forward, in a relationship or before you see them multiple times or whatever else, right? And again, I've been talking a lot about romantic relationships here, and because this night, was someone who I'd gone on a date with, but these same principles apply to any sort of interpersonal relationship, right? A common understanding helps you move forward in a more productive and efficient way. And so when there are disagreements, or not even disagreements, but differences in viewpoints, differences in opinion, seek that understanding. It's not about seeking agreement necessarily, right? We have to see things the same way. It's about understanding the other person's viewpoint. Now, I think as the relationship and romantic connection evolves into something deeper and more long lasting, I think that the compromise and common understanding parts will become more important. But again, that comes from a place of seeking to understand, right? Not just, hey, I like this or didn't like this, or he said this and that was a red flag and I had to go, right? If you can really understand where someone else is coming from, why they're saying the things that they are, oftentimes you can speak to the underlying concern or underlying need or underlying emotion being expressed without it necessarily looking a certain way or looking the way a person expects, right? And an example of this is, um, in my case, I remember saying to, a woman, I expect, and about the text example, let's just follow that up, right? Saying, hey, I expect that Um, and again, this wording that I'm going to use here is a little bit clunky. I feel like there are better ways to word it, but the message of what I was conveying is, or what I feel like I hear from a lot of guys is that they expect as much investment in a conversation over text as they are giving, right? If they feel like they are putting out more via messages or via asking a woman on dates or something else than the woman is giving back, then the woman isn't meeting them halfway, she isn't that interested, and it's better for them to move on and go to someone else, right? Again, reasonable to have these expectations in my opinion. However, if you aren't sharing that in a way where the woman understands where you're coming from, or the other party understands where you're coming from, then I don't feel like you're doing enough to make sure that to express yourself in a way that is really easy for the other person to understand, to and potentially to get with, right? Because if they don't really understand where you're coming from and it seems like you're just kind of pulling this out of the air, or it seems like honestly what sometimes it can seem like a lot of times is, oh, this person has baggage from their past, right? Something in their past about messages came up, and so now they're overly sensitive or overly focused on this, and I don't really want to deal with someone that has this sort of baggage. Or, hey, this woman, brought up a guy and money, and so, hey, maybe she's had money issues or had things in her past where guys haven't paid, and so this is baggage that I don't want to deal with, right? It can come off as a little bit out there, let's just say, right? And I think a more grounded place to come from is a place of understanding and a place of communicating to help the other person understand, right? And you may communicate and the other person just doesn't get it. They, in some cases, may not want to understand. You'll have to accept that and move on. But also, you want to be trying and looking at yourself and what you can be doing better, right? Instead of just focusing on what other people can be doing, you also have to be looking at yourself and what you can be doing better, right? At the end of the day, I feel like as you improve your quality in terms of how you relate with other people interpersonally in all of your relationships, then the quality of your relationships increases accordingly. So if you are able to present yourself, your opinions, your viewpoints in a way that leads to a more common understanding, then I believe the quality and have seen that the quality of your relationships improves as you improve your ability to relate to others and to share your opinions, viewpoints in a way that helps them understand where you're really coming from, what you think is important, why you like what you like, why you don't like certain things, and all of the above, everything like that extended. Exactly. So, all in all, right, out at this gala, meet this woman again, talk with her for a little bit. Again, still polite, pleasant, invites me to hang out more, but I end up declining and doing something else, right? All good, no harm, no foul. Or I won't even say end up declining, I'll say we end up, doing different things and all good, all fine. But what really kind of stuck afterwards is that, hey, next time it comes up where I'm on a date and a woman is saying that she has these expectations for how the relationship or new relationship or interaction should be playing out, I should be doing more to say how I see things potentially playing out, right? And also highlighting maybe some differences between the things that I feel like she said and wanted and the things I said that I said and wanted, right? I think my personal viewpoint is that this sort of early communication helps because it helps to iron out misunderstandings and helps, right, come to a common understanding before a misunderstanding leads to hurt feelings or disappointments in some other way, shape, or form. So, you got to be willing to look at yourself. You got to be willing to hold yourself accountable. And you have to ask yourself, what can I do to have a better result next time? Now, a lot of the times, you may not match with somebody, you may not work out with someone, you may go on a date, find out you don't really like them, and it's just a lack of chemistry, right? Sometimes you walk away and think, what could I have done differently? Well, could have done this, could have done that, but really, overall, I like the way I showed up, and if I had to do it again, I would probably show up in very much the same way. Fantastic, right there. There are a lot of people out there. You're not going to mesh and match and become the very best of friends with everyone that you meet. I think that's very, very reasonable. I think that should be what you expect. I think to expect that everyone you meet or everyone you match with is going to become your very best friend or, your soulmate is ridiculous, right? Very, very ridiculous. So I don't think that's really anyone's like expectation. So I feel like that's even just a bit of a straw man argument. But the important thing here is that you got to be willing to look at yourself. You have to work on yourself. You have to improve yourself to attract more of the people you want to, right? More of the type of people that you want to, right? If you are not attracting the type of person that you want in your life, it is your fault. And you can blame others and say, "Oh, they're intimidated by me. They didn't get my sense of humor. They weren't willing to give me a chance. They didn't give me enough time. They got overly offended." Whatever, 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 whatever. If you cannot attract the type of person that you want, it is your responsibility to do something about that. And it starts with you being reflective about how you are showing up, right? In a weird way, or maybe a not so weird way, I feel like dating and relationships can be a mirror, right? It can allow us to get better insight into how we are showing up because other people will react to us in different ways based on us showing up in potentially different ways, right? And as I've been in more and more relationships and gone on more dates, it's allowed me to see some gaps, right? Some areas where I felt like, hey, I'm doing what's best, I'm taking the right approach, but when things didn't work out the way I wanted, and I took the time to reflect, to listen to others, to get some different viewpoints and perspectives, it allowed me to then shift and say, okay, well, maybe next time I could do this a little bit differently. Having the opportunity to then go and next time show up a little bit differently, I then had more evidence, right? And more options, right? Hey, I could show up this way, and I've seen that when I showed up this way, I got these results. And I've also shown up a little bit like this, and when I showed up like this, I got these other results, right? That then allows you to make a comparison. Hey, which set of results do I like better? And even to take that a step further and say, hey, well, maybe there's some things I like over here and some things I like over here. How can I combine these two to get the best of both worlds to make my results even better, right? To show up in a way that will allow me to be even more successful, right? To connect with other people in a way that lets them appreciate me to an even higher degree, right? It allows them to really get a chance to see a fuller picture of me. And with this fuller picture of me, this more authentic me, right? My full self, as opposed to just how they saw me when I walked up and said hello, or how they saw me in a few pictures on an app, they can connect with me at a deeper level and we can both enjoy a more fulfilling relationship and connection because of it, right? So I think when it gets to the point of hurt feelings, or, and I would even be willing to say that potentially on this date, right? That's maybe what happened with me. She shared these expectations or these viewpoints or these desires, and when I felt like it was not jiving with who I am or how I've been showing up or how I want to show up, then it kind of hurt my feelings. And instead of seeking more to come to that common understanding, right, of, why do you feel this? And that's all well and good. Now that I understand why you feel the way you do, I also want to share how I thought about things so that you understand where I was coming from. Instead of doing that, I feel like I was a little bit more quiet, right? A little bit more of, I heard something that I didn't really like. And so instead of me saying, I don't like this, let me just not say anything at all. But my actions in terms of not wanting to follow up for future dates will be enough kind of feedback to show I didn't like it, right? That I could say I didn't like it, or I could show I didn't like it, and actions speak louder than words. I feel like that's the wrong sort of approach and perspective to have, right? And I'm again putting this on myself. I feel like, as I've said, is a better approach is, how can I help her understand my perspective, right? And even my perspective in terms of why what she said may have been something that didn't jive with me, but also my perspective in terms of, hey, you said you're looking for these things. Let me share what I'm looking for so that you understand where I'm coming from, right? So, all in all, you're going to have to communicate, and there will be a lot of times more internal resistance to communicating things that you feel like will upset the other person, right? And I feel like that's natural. I feel like we always want to be, and it's a good thing to be considerate of the emotions of others. Where I feel like the rub comes in is that oftentimes we think, well, instead of sharing something that will hurt the other person's emotions, let me not say anything at all. And when we choose to not say anything at all, we are choosing not to communicate. And by not communicating, we're not doing the work of letting them understand you and where you're at and where you're coming from. And when they don't understand you, I feel like that ultimately leads to a less in-depth connection in the relationship, right? Now, people will very rightly point to and say, well, hey, they may understand you, but feel like your viewpoint is very different from them. And when you have a different viewpoint from them, that may cause them to want to have more distance from you, right? We all, I feel like it's very natural to look for commonalities in those that we are close to, right? Things that we like about them and that they like about us, and things that we can do together and both believe in, and et cetera, et cetera. Very natural. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. However, what I'll say is that there is a lot of room for leeway, right? A lot of room for differences, right? I don't, there is no, we are all unique. There is no one who is 100% like you. And so there should always be some room for differences, some understanding that people will be different from you, right? And you may want to date someone, or you may think that, hey, for my very closest relationships, I want someone who very much sees things the way that I do because of whatever, right? For whatever reason or reasons. Good, fine, all well and good. However, if you get to a point where the other person or you yourself aren't speaking up because they're afraid of hurting the relationship by sharing themselves, then that is a key that there is a barrier to how deep your relationship will go, right? When there's a time that the other person feels like I can't be myself, I can't express what I'm really thinking, that is putting a barrier, a limit on the relationship because the other person then cannot show up authentically. They cannot bring their full self to the table, right? So there may be parts of their full self that you don't like and that you don't want in the relationship, but at least understand where they're coming from, right? And with them understanding where you're coming from, you understanding where they're coming from, that is a much better place to begin a compromise or a mutual agreed upon understanding, right? A mutual pact, which I feel like relationships are in a way, and can help you move forward as opposed to, well, hey, there's just going to be this part of myself that I'm going to have to keep to the side, right? Or that hey, this person doesn't agree with it, doesn't like it, and so I'm just not going to be able to talk to this person about this thing, right? That can be okay. You can have certain friends that, hey, me and this friend agree on these things, so I'll talk to them about these things, whereas these other friends, we're more similar in these other ways. And so because we're more similar in these other ways, it means that when I'm around them, we do different activities together, or, they see a little bit different side of me. You can compartmentalize, and that's all well and good. But to have a truly deep relationship where people feel comfortable being authentic, at the very least, you have to be willing to understand them where they're at, and you have to be willing to share your views, your opinions, your likes, your dislikes, your wants, your expectations, so that they can understand you, right? If you aren't bringing your full, authentic self to the table, I do not believe you will have the same level of success in relationships as someone who is as the you who is being fully authentic, right? And that may mean that some people like you and some people don't. Absolutely, that should be expected, right? You are unique. The way you show up will be different than the way anyone else shows up. And if that means that some people don't like you as much, you should be okay with that, right? Your goal should not be to get everyone to like you. Your goal should be to love, right? Your goal shouldn't be to get everyone to like you. And I would even say you shouldn't strive to like everyone else, right? I think what is better is to strive to love everyone regardless of how much you like them, right? To spiritually understand, respect them, recognize that they're human just like you are. Their experiences, viewpoints, opinions, everything else may be different, but there's a soul in there just like there's a soul in you. So it's not just about getting to a place where you really like the other person and they really like you. I think it's about getting to a place where you can show up authentically. And then when you are really showing up authentically, when you can really help people understand you, can really help people see things from your perspective, naturally, some will gravitate towards that and some will gravitate away from it, right? But when you are showing up authentically, you are putting yourself in the best position to have a deep, meaningful connection, right? And when it gets to a point where you're not willing to seek out understanding from the other person, or they're not willing to seek out understanding from you, then things will start to crack or crumble and sometimes even fall apart. So, all in all, you're going to have to look at yourself, right? The things that come off as problems with the people that you interact with, you have to be willing to look at yourself and look at how you are contributing to the situation and ask yourself, could I be showing up differently? What's even better than could I be showing up differently is then taking it to the next step and saying, well, let me try showing up differently based on this feedback that I've gotten from others, these perspectives. And when you get it from others, make sure that it's an expert, right? Make sure it's someone who has some experience, some skin in the game, right? Everyone has an opinion, but that doesn't mean that everyone's opinion is necessarily worth listening to, right? So I think the opinions that you should weigh more heavily are the opinions of those who have a lot of relevant experience, right? And relevant experience can mean different things based on different contexts, but just keep that in mind that those with more relevant experience, I feel like can help you see different perspectives more easily, help you understand different perspectives more easily, and have also put in the time experimenting and growing and going through the same sorts of things that you're going through, just potentially at a more in-depth or higher level. So if you can learn from them, you help shorten your learning curve, you help yourself improve more quickly, and ultimately help you become more successful. So you're going to have to be reflective, look at how you're showing up, try out some different ways of showing up, some different ways of expressing yourself, see what works, what doesn't. After you get this feedback on showing up this way or that way, you'll then be able to say what worked well here, what didn't work well here, have different viewpoints, different things to consider, different experiences that help you then refine yourself in a more strategic, efficient, effective way. As you show up in a more effective way, you are then helping other people see more of you, right? You are giving them a chance to see you and your authentic self. And keep in mind, and this will be hard for a lot of people, that when you are showing up in a different way, it should still be you showing up as you, right? The saying that I love with this is I can wear different clothes, but I'm the same person, right? I can show up in a different way, but I'll still be showing up as me, as Jamal. You can show up in a different way and still be showing up as you. So, if you are feeling like the way you're showing up is really not you, then that's a clue that something is a little bit off, right? And sometimes it's just discomfort that, hey, I've been showing up this one way my entire life. And so now that I'm trying a different way of showing up, it's uncomfortable. But you should still be able to see that in this new way of showing up, you are bringing yourself to the table, right? And if you are doing too many things that don't feel like you, then try and baby step it, right? Try and make small changes at a time. Try and give yourself some time to get used to this different way of showing up, to gather more feedback, right, on how showing up in a different way may allow others to respond to you in different ways, because ultimately that will help you grow, right? This isn't just a thing of someone is going to hand you the answer, someone is going to tell you the right thing to say, someone is going to give you the line or tell you how to say what you want in a way where others will just 100% respond to it positively. It will be a little bit of trial and error. And what I would say is you should come to a point where you feel comfortable, right? It's you should be seeking out the feedback and guidance of others, but you have to be willing to take what they say and adjust it a little bit to fit you, right? You avoid plagiarism by putting your own spin on the words of others, right? We all can resonate with certain ideas, certain things that we've heard, certain quotes, etc. But when it's coming from your mouth and being a part of your life, it's going to have to be internalized to fit your authentic self, right? And so it'll take its own little spin, even if it's a slight one, to be part of the authentic you, right? So, all in all, experiment with different things, get some feedback, take what you've learned, use it to improve, and recognize that the goal here is to be your authentic self. That if it gets to a point where you feel like you can't share yourself or what you're thinking, that should be a clue to do more work, right? In my case, it was, hey, I heard something I didn't like. But instead of me sharing my viewpoint because it may be offensive, I'm going to be quiet, right? Instead of me showing up in this fully authentic way, I'm going to be a little bit more quiet. And by being a little bit more quiet, I didn't give the other person a chance to see the authentic me or the authentic me to that greater extent, right? You'll always have to get to a time and you always have to make the decision of whether to continue to investing in a relationship and interaction or to go and do something else. So it's not just a thing of always keep pushing forward, always try and get to the understanding, right? You're going to have to keep in mind that, hey, it may be more beneficial, more time efficient for me to move on and go on and do something else. And wish you well. Take care. But when you are seeking that understanding and seeking to be understood, that is a much stronger foundation for a fruitful relationship, right? And again, I've talked a lot about romantic relationships here, but this applies to interpersonal relationships in general. You want to be your authentic self, and you want someone who appreciates you for the authentic you. So if you feel like you're not getting that, one, look at how you're showing up. Think if there could be tweaks to where you could be still be your authentic self, but maybe show up in a little bit different way, maybe present yourself in a little bit different way that helps people understand you. And also think about, are you doing things to understand others, right? That maybe if you understood others in a certain way, you could still be yourself, but you would just respond to them a little bit differently. And you would respond to them a little bit differently because you've realized that responding to them a little bit differently leads to better success and more results, and you get to still be your authentic self, right? So we all have those things and those friends where we don't want to share the feedback because we know it'll hurt their feelings or because they won't react to it. They may shut down or get defensive or be hurt, etc. I'm not saying seek to hurt others, right? I'm not saying, push so that they understand your viewpoint so much to where you don't care about their feelings. It's definitely a balance, but see if there are things you can do to get closer to that, right? Don't just accept it as rote, accept it as fact, as, hey, I tried once, got a bad result, and so I'm never going to try again, or, we'll always know for the future that this isn't a road to go down. Maybe it means that, at some time in the future when a similar situation comes up, before you know, reacted a certain way and this time you react a little bit differently or this time you share a little bit more. The first time you shared a bit, didn't get a positive response, now you're going to share a little bit more or share a little bit of a reminder that, hey, I see things this way, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So all in all, the key takeaway from this night out and from this video is that you're going to have to look at yourself and work on yourself, but the goal is to show up authentically, because when you show up as your authentic self, you are giving other people the chance to connect with you in a deeper way, right? A chance to understand you at a deeper level, a chance to see more of you. And when they see more of you and like it, that will lead to more successful results and relationships in the long term. Not everyone's going to like you. You're not going to like everyone else. You can still love them, they can still love you, but when you do find that person that really appreciates you, your authentic self, your genuine personality, your genuine character traits, how you are genuinely showing up, it will be so much more rewarding and will be worth the effort and the self improvement and the time that you put in. So don't be afraid of the feedback. Don't be afraid of hearing other viewpoints that contradict yours. Don't be afraid to try different things that are a little bit outside of what you've done before, right? View it as a chance to improve, right? You have to try something to know whether it will work or not. And if you just think things won't work without ever having tried it, then maybe you're not giving yourself enough of an opportunity to progress. Of course, there'll be certain things that, hey, I'm not going to try it. I don't want to do that. I don't want to show up in that way. Fine. But understand that just saying I am who I am and others can take it or leave it is not enough to maximize your results, right? To maximize your results, to have the most fulfilling relationships, you have to be willing to see things, see others, hear where they're at, hear where they're coming from, meet them where they're at, and be willing to adjust to them without losing your core authenticity, right? Without muddling who you genuinely are, without showing up as someone else, without just leaning into what they want, without also kind of making sure that your wants, needs, expectations are also being met as well. So it'll be tough. It'll be a journey. It can be quick. It can be very easy, actually. It can be simple. It can be very straightforward. But oftentimes it will require some effort, right? Oftentimes it'll be a process. Progress can be a process. So accept it and understanding that the improvement that comes from being able to present yourself authentically is worth it, right? It does not necessarily mean that you will have the best results with everyone that you meet, but it means that for those who meet and really vibe with you, the resulting relationship will be so much more rewarding because you can show up as yourself. You can truly be you, and you know that you being you will be appreciated, will be loved, and that you can build a positive win win relationship from just being yourself, right? So seek the feedback, hear the different things, try a few new things out if you've only been showing up in certain ways and haven't gotten the feedback before. Understand that you, as your authentic self, are lovable, right? There are people out there for you. You may have to tweak some things to present yourself in a way that allows other people to connect in a better way, but that doesn't mean you have to change who you are. I hope this is helpful for you. I hope you keep getting out there, and I hope you take care. Goodbye.